This is Derrick Broze. This is Derrick Broze of the Conscious Resistance. I'm here in Standing Rock.
That man is wanted in 5 different countries: Chile, Argentina, Brazil.
We've been fighting a long time. We've all lost so very much. So many loved ones gone. You are not alone. There are pockets of resistance all around the planet. We are at the brink. We'll all stay alive. You have no idea how important you are. If you're listening to this, you are the resistance.
Hey everyone, this is Derrick Broze with the Conscious Resistance Network, and welcome to episode 178 of the Conscious Resistance Live. What's up, guys? It's been a little while. It is late March 23rd as I'm recording this, and I guess I'm doing the Conscious Resistance Live once a month now. This used to be a weekly podcast, but honestly, seems like monthly is better for me. So in the month since my last show, I start looking up stories that catch my eye. I save them in a folder until I got enough stories in that folder and I feel like I have something worth saying. I don't want to just do a weekly or a daily show just for the sake of hearing myself talk. I'm trying to bring you guys hard-hitting investigative journalism that goes beyond the left, the right, beyond the partisanship. And so I don't want to just force it and do a show, as I said, every day for the sake of just doing a show. I want to make sure when I speak, when I broadcast to you guys, that I'm bringing you important stories that you're not going to hear on every other channel out there, and especially my own original reporting. That's what is most important to me, that I'm most excited about to cover on this platform. So again, thank you to everybody who has been tuned in, watching all of my content over the last couple months, last couple weeks, while I have not been doing a regular show. So let's go ahead and just jump right into it. First things first, I want to remind all of you guys to follow my website, theconsciousresistance.com. I've been broadcasting content on this channel for 13 years, and it is the home to find everything I do, including the new Pyramid of Power conclusion, the Pyramid of Power book, all my other books. You can find interviews and podcasts I've done, presentations I gave, as well as content from my other contributors, like this new article, Sacred Resistance, How Getting in Touch with Land and Spirit is a Revolutionary Act, from Don Villa Jr., which I think is a really cool one. So hope you guys will check that out. But again, please bookmark theconsciousresistance.com. Visit us once a week. Sign up for my email list. That's always going to be the best place to get all my content. I send an update maybe once a week or so. And, before we get into the news, just want to let you guys know some things going on with me. You might have recently seen this interview I did with Naomi Wolf, and wow, this, I guess, is my first time publicly commenting on this, really. Wow. I went into this thing thinking I was signing up for a real debate with an intelligent person, and I got a bunch of ad hominems and filibusters and all kinds of just bullshit from a clearly intelligent person who chose not to show up for a real debate for one reason or another. I'll let you guys speculate why that was. But let me just say, I have been reading all the comments. I see all the comments, and I'm really grateful for all the kind words you guys shared across my social media, as well as those of you who've been going to Naomi Wolf's Daily Clout on Substack and YouTube and elsewhere and letting her know, like, you did a horrible job. I'm unsubscribing from you. I'm canceling my paid subscription, all these kinds of things. I think that matters. I think that's important. That's how you drive and push people towards doing a better job, is you hit them where it hurts and you say, look, I'm not going to support you if you do this kind of content. So I hope you guys did enjoy that. If you haven't had a chance to check it out, it is at theconsciousresistance.com. And then I just want to mention as well, I did do an article write-up, which I think is maybe even more important. I'm just sharing a couple of thoughts here real quick. But if you want to get like my deep thoughts on all the topics Naomi and I covered, including her asking me about whether I voted or living in Mexico and all the sort of distractions. If you want to get the facts behind everything I talked about, including regime change wars, Operation Ajax, the U.S. effort to overthrow Iran, so much that we covered into that I just didn't have time to, pull up at the moment, especially because she just wouldn't really let me get a word in. The history of U.S. intervention, and even the CIA-ISIS connection that I discussed in the interview, when she kind of laughed, was like, what's your source? I've never heard of this. And then also laughed whenever I mentioned that 9/11 was not done by a bunch of terrorists with box cutters. Clearly, she's got some learning to do. And I talk about building a coalition of anti-war, pro-peace activists before it's too late. And yes, you can see that interview there. But I encourage you guys to read that whole write-up. That will be in the show notes, because I do think it's important. And like I said, I think that, when it comes to debates and stuff like that, hopefully it's clear to you guys, I'm not just doing these things to score points and like boost my ego. I had some people even ask, Derrick, why are you going to waste time debating a Zionist? You're just going to say this thing and that thing. And I think some of you don't really understand why I do what I do, and that's fine. It's not your purpose to, or your job to, but let me just give you a little background real quick. I am a journalist. I am also an activist, and I am also a free human being, and I care about the future of this planet. I care about debunking propaganda, and I do love using my intellect and my mind to run circles around people who I think maybe underestimate me, I'll say, which is, I think, what Mrs. Wolf did. And I enjoy using the power of that mind to communicate ideas. So the reason I even bothered debating her is so that her audience and anybody else who might follow her, who would follow her line of thinking and the propaganda, might say, this Broze dude, this young man, respectfully, he actually has something to say. And maybe I should check out his work now and not listen so much to this Wolf lady. And I think I achieved that goal. So the whole reason I do debates or content or documentaries or books or anything is because I'm trying to awaken humanity. And I know maybe that sounds silly or naive or idealistic, but I haven't quite given up on the idea of helping pull more minds out of the matrix. I still think there's time, and I'm going to continue to do that in whatever ways I can. So thank you guys for supporting that. One other thing, I am headed to CPAC. So I'm recording this Monday afternoon right now, and I'm headed to Conservative PAC in Grapevine, Texas, basically a suburb north of Dallas, Texas. I'll be flying there Wednesday morning, and I'll be in Dallas Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then come back home to Morelia, Mexico on Sunday afternoon. And I'm there. The CPAC, I think check-in starts Wednesday, but the actual event is Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And I did a video about this recently. You guys may have seen it, but if you haven't, I did a crowdfunding campaign. I was aiming to only raise $1,000 because I thought that would be enough. Actually, it ended up not being enough. But the great thing is you guys have donated like $2,300, $2,400, and that's awesome. I appreciate you. That's allowed me to book the flight. I just got my hotel booked as well. It costs like, I think $600, something like that. So I've already spent $1,100 and I haven't even arrived yet. And that's not counting cost of food, Ubers, or public transportation to get around, or whatever else I need to do to make this happen. So your support really makes it happen. And that's going to allow me to go to Dallas, and I'm going to try to confront, question, give serious interviews and questions to Ted Cruz, to Secretary of Agriculture Brooke Rollins, to Robert Malone, to so many other people that I went over in this video. So stay tuned for more videos from that this weekend, and next week you'll see that. And also I found out it just happens to be another edition of the No Kings protest, which you guys know, I did go do some independent journalism, some man on the street interviews last year in 2025 in June in Houston, where I'm from originally, and then in October. So I was at the first two, not so much as a participant or a supporter, although I do support a lot of their concerns, not necessarily their solutions, but to get a real, on the ground feel for what are people actually saying, because there's so much propaganda out there. This is just George Soros protest. It's going to be violent everywhere from all the freaking MAGA right-wing and mainstream alternative media. And I wanted to actually give you guys a real story and let the people speak for themselves, right? So that was my focus, and that will be my focus again. Since I'm going to be in Dallas, and I mean, there's no Kings protests happening in Mexico, but since I'm going to be in the U.S. for CPAC, I figured, all right, I'll make some time on Saturday to go to the local protest and document and do some more interviews. So lots of content coming this week and next week. Stay tuned for that. But tonight, on tonight's show, we've got a few main stories we're going to be covering. As the title of the show is indicating, we're going to be talking about Iran, and we'll be getting to that at the end of the show, including an exclusive new interview with Christian Westbrook, aka Unshadowed, formerly known as Ice Age Farmer. So stay tuned. That's about a 45-minute interview. It's going to be the final conclusion of the show once we get through some headlines, because I do want to talk about a few stories, including that Pentagon media rules you guys may remember about from last fall. We'll give you an update on that. And then some Epstein news. Yes, obviously Epstein is everywhere right now. But as I said a few moments ago, I'm not going to talk to you about the things you've already heard on a million other channels, but some things that I think are important. We'll talk about some more Make America Healthy Again, MAHA bait and switch. How, despite best intentions from activists on the ground, people like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and others in the Trump administration are not actually trying to make America healthy again. And then an interesting story that just came across my headlines, that my eyes, Israeli minister's daughter found dead after trying to expose ritual abuse. Pretty interesting stuff. We're going to do an update as well on the Finders cult. I've been waiting to share this with you guys, and so I'm excited to share about some new open records requests, FOIA information I've dropped, and some new rare footage of the Finders case that I'll share tonight exclusively. Then an update on Mexico, what's going on in Mexico. You may have heard there was an announcement by Mexico's president discussing ending cash, and they're working on this biometric ID. So we'll talk about that. And then of course, we'll conclude with this interview from Christian Westbrook. So we got a lot to cover. Let's not waste any more time. Let's go ahead and get right into it. As I mentioned, this first story is a story that I covered back in October, Conscious Resistance episode 165, freedom of speech and press under attack, and covering how the Trump administration was going after the media. They're going after universities and stuff. And that includes the DOJ, Department of Justice, and the Department of Defense coming up with new rules for the media, basically saying, the media can't just be roaming the halls of the Pentagon. They needed to sign a loyalty pledge. We actually had our contributor, Don Villa Jr., write this article, Pentagon transparency restriction, nothing new for the military-industrial complex. And so one of the things I pride myself on doing here is I don't want to just talk about one story once back in October 2025 and never give you an update on it. If there's updates, I think it's important for those of us in independent media to share those updates, to keep you informed, because I think that, for me, that's the whole purpose. Like I said, I'm not just talking to hear myself speak. I'm hoping to inform and educate and empower you. So let's see what the latest is here. This is from the New York Times just a couple of days ago. News outlets pressure Pentagon to restore access after court ruling. So as I said, back in September, late September, October, Pete Hegseth over at the Pentagon says, okay, all the journalists in the Pentagon need to now sign a loyalty pledge. And every single outlet, except for like Newsmax, One America News, but even Fox, right-wing media, a lot of them said, nope, we're not going to do it. So you had left-wing journalists, independent, you had bloggers, you had right-wing, and the vast majority of them said, we're not going to sign this loyalty pledge. The big piece of it, the big concern was that they were signing a pledge saying that they would not report on information that they heard in the Pentagon unless it had been pre-approved by the government, which is not journalism. That's just, literally that's stenography. So that was bullshit. So most of them said, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to comply. And as you can see here in this picture, they walked out. And as I said at the time, there were a lot of people in the independent alternative media who were celebrating. Ha ha, look at these stupid mainstream stenographers, mainstream journalists walking out of the Pentagon. Ha ha ha. Like MAGA was celebrating this as if it's a win. But what I said at the time, and I'll reiterate here, is that anytime the freedom of press, the transparency of media is suppressed, that's not a good thing. That doesn't mean you have to endorse any of those outlets, because we can talk about the different times those outlets have been involved in, like lying about COVID and lying about 9/11 and just dismissing all kinds of stories that we know deserve time and attention, and they dismiss them as so-called conspiracies. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that we should be celebrating the fact that there will be less transparency in the media, the fact that there will be less transparency for the people. I don't think that's a win. I think we should be very careful and wary of, celebrating just because somebody we don't like, in this case, the corporate media, is being attacked, because ultimately that is not going to lead to more transparency for us, the average people. So that's what I said at the time. And now we have this federal judge ruled on Friday that key parts of the Pentagon's press policy were unconstitutional. A group representing journalists who cover the Defense Department is seeking the immediate restoration of press access for its members after a federal judge ruled on Friday. That was just this past Friday, that key parts of the department's policy were unconstitutional. David Schultz, counsel for the group, the Pentagon Press Association, said in a letter, quote, "Our clients and the public face ongoing irreparable harm, so long as the experienced military reporters of the PPA are excluded from the Pentagon while active combat operations are being conducted in multiple arenas." And I think this is exactly what they want. They want to push out anybody who might not report the Iran war, for example, or anything the way they want, and only the people who stayed, which a few people did stay and they have no spine and they said, well, okay, I'll sign the loyalty pledge. Those people are just going to repeat whatever talking points the state wants. And that's a dangerous place to be when we just, again, you don't have to endorse the mainstream media. We know they lie on a lot of things, but to just get rid of it all completely, you would be getting rid of a lot of good journalists, because despite what some people in the conspiracy culture believe, not every single mainstream journalist is a bad person. There's a lot of, sort of nameless, faceless journalists just doing good work that aren't trying to push propaganda. Nevertheless, it says, again, the Pentagon, they put new rules. Rather than comply, dozens of journalists surrendered their press passes. The New York Times accused the Pentagon of violating the First and Fifth Amendments with the new rules. And in his ruling on Friday, Judge Paul Friedman of the U.S. District Court of D.C. sided with the New York Times. He ordered the immediate reinstatement of press passes for 7 Times journalists who had previously held press passes. The Times said in a statement, quote, "We are seeking to have our passes restored in keeping with the judge's order. Our legal department sent a letter to Pentagon counsel today asking for restoration on Monday." So there may be an update right now. We'll do a quick search in a second, because if the government, the Trump government's listening to the court here, which I wouldn't be surprised if they're not, then that means that these folks would have been reinstated. And of course, this is now a precedent that other journalists could use to get themselves back into Pentagon. In an interview, Mr. Schultz said he believed that the judge's ruling meant that the Pentagon had a legal obligation to return passes to all those who opted to turn them in last year. Pentagon correspondents have said that the press passes enhance their reporting on the military because they facilitate personal interactions with press officials and sources, though Pete Hegseth last year curtailed the areas where reporters may roam without an escort. The Pentagon did not respond to questions about the restoration. On Friday, Sean Parnell, the department's chief spokesman, said on X, quote, "We disagree with the decision and are pursuing an immediate appeal. An appeal from the government would most likely include a petition for a stay of the judge's order," basically saying, "Judge, don't force us to let these people back in. Stay this order until there's a further ruling." So let's go ahead real quick and see if there's any other updates now that it's Monday. Okay, so I just did a search on CIA Google, and it doesn't look like there's been any new updates. Basically, all the reporting is just about the judge's ruling. We haven't seen if there's been any update on whether or not the Trump government listened to it, but based on their statement they made there, I think they're going to try to ignore it. All right, let's go ahead to our next story. Now, like I said, I don't really want to talk about Epstein. Epstein's everywhere. I'm sure you guys are all Epsteined out. But of course, getting to the bottom and the truth of what happened with Jeffrey Epstein, not only the fact that, yes, he was a serial abuser, despite what people like Michael Tracy and others want you to believe. And yes, he was deeply tied to cloning, to the tech world, to cybernetics, to international finance, to obviously scientists, celebrities. All of those connections do matter. And with time, myself, I know Whitney Webb's working on some new work, and other great researchers out there are dissecting it and getting further to the truth, closer to the truth. But I'll save you the going through all the files. I do have a few threads I've been pulling on that I'll share with you soon. But the main thing I wanted to share in this story is the fact that I don't think, and I never thought, that the Epstein files coming out was going to lead to mass arrest. I know a lot of the Q people thought that, or MAGA thought, like, no, Trump's going to be the one to release them. If you guys remember back during the election, I found a clip from an interview Trump gave on Fox where he said, he was specifically asked, like, would you release the alien UFO files? He said, yeah, I think so. Would you release the JFK, RFK files? Yeah. And then they asked him about Epstein, and he was like, we'll have to think about that one. So Trump never really promised to release the Epstein files, despite what people thought. And then, as we saw, he was dragged all the way to it. He didn't want it to happen. So either way, I never thought it was necessarily going to happen. And if it did, I didn't think it was going to be some smoking gun that brings down the whole pyramid of power, mass arrest, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's silly. People who are thinking that, imagining that, aren't paying attention to reality. So I just want to say that first, because this next story is why I think now that files have been released, and for one, we have to acknowledge that we've only gotten, I think, less than 10% of the files that the government itself admits to having. That's not even things that they may have had time to destroy, get rid of. Like the talk of there being videos in Epstein's house. We know there was cameras he had in his office and other places. Have those videos been released? We don't know. They could be buried in some of the current files. They could be buried in things that haven't been released. They could have been destroyed already. So my point is, I never thought getting the Epstein files was going to be some groundbreaking revelation that was going to change everything. I think that was a whole limited hangout. It was a little carrot they were hanging over your head to keep you voting. Now, here's just one more reason why I don't think we're ever going to get that real truth about Jeffrey Epstein. Now, I covered this, I believe, in the last podcast last month, how there was a report. There's some files that show that a hacker actually hacked the FBI. They're claiming a foreign hacker and stole a bunch of Epstein files. Now, that was already found by independent reporters, but now the article I'm showing you here, which is from a couple of days ago, this is being confirmed in the mainstream. Now they're admitting exclusive foreign hacker in 2023 compromised Epstein files held by FBI source and documents show. So let's get into this. A foreign hacker compromised files relating to the FBI's investigation, of the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein during a break-in at the New York field office 3 years ago. So it's been 3 years ago during the end of the Biden administration. They say foreign hacker. Anybody have any thoughts on what foreign nation might want to hack these? According to a source familiar with the matter and recently published DOJ documents reviewed by Reuters. The details of who accessed the FBI's field office, including the allegation that a foreign hacker was involved, are being reported here for the first time. So like I said, we knew there was a hack, but they're making it clear it was a foreign hacker from some foreign nation. So in a statement, the FBI said it was described as a isolated incident, a cyber incident. The FBI restricted access to the malicious actor and rectified the network. The investigation remains ongoing, so we don't have further comments to provide at the time. So they're acknowledging it. The FBI is acknowledging that this happened, and they're even saying there's still an investigation happening. So, maybe put your hopes into the fact that they may make arrests. I wouldn't hold your breath. Although the source said the intrusion appeared to have been carried out by a cyber criminal rather than a foreign government, the incident underscores the file's potential intelligence value, one academic said. The legally mandated publication of the documents has exposed the financier's ties to politics, finance, academia, business, et cetera, et cetera. So the academic John Lindsay, who researches the role of emerging technology in global security, said, quote, who wouldn't want to be after the Epstein files if you're the Russians? Yeah, of course, they want you to worry about the Russians, or somebody interested in compromat. If foreign intelligence agencies are not thinking seriously about the Epstein files as a target, I would be shocked. The breach was first reported by CNN and Reuters on February 17th. The connection to the Epstein files was made by a French magazine, Marianne. And then, of course, now they're able to confirm more details, which is that the hack occurred. Now, here's the specific details. A server at the Child Exploitation Forensic Lab at the FBI's New York field office was inadvertently left vulnerable by Special Agent Aaron Spivak, who was trying to navigate the Bureau's complex procedures for handling digital advice, according to the source in the documents. And what we've seen in the documents, which I discussed last time, is where you can see Mr. Spivak describing everything he did and said, yeah, I became aware there was a hack going on. He wrote a timeline which included the large cache of Epstein documents. And the break-in happened February 12th, 2023. So again, this is well before any of these documents were made public. And wouldn't it be convenient for somebody 3 years ago to hack and steal things and destroy them? Or now, let's just imagine it is a foreign government, if Israel doesn't already have access to these files, or some other government, China or anybody else, they could potentially truly have damaging material on American politicians. This is how people get blackmailed. This is how they make crazy decisions that go against the exact things that they claim to care about. They might be being blackmailed behind the scenes. So yeah, I think this is interesting to see. Like I said, I think it's another sign we're never going to get the real truth of the Epstein files, because whatever was in there, if it hadn't been destroyed, if some smoking gun or really dark thing hadn't been destroyed since 2008, the original 2005, the original arrest of Epstein, if it hadn't been destroyed in the last 20 years, well, now it's apparently been hacked and somebody has access to this. This timeline, which is in the Epstein files, does not say which specific files were accessed, whether the hacker downloaded the data or who the hacker was, and says Reuters could not establish what, if any, overlap the affected data had with the Epstein documents published earlier this year or the files that remain under wraps. So the agent, though, whose name appears in documents elsewhere, did not return repeated messaging. They couldn't reach his lawyer. And his statement to the FBI investigators examining whether he was responsible for the breach, he said that he was being made a scapegoat for the intrusion. And this is the interesting part, is this agent might not have, they're trying to say, oh, he was navigating the complex digital fields of the FBI's office, blah, 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 and he made a mistake and left the door open and somebody got in. He said he was being a scapegoat for the intrusion, and that conflicting bureau policies and faulty guidance around information technology were to blame. So it could be that he was just the patsy for a foreign intrusion, whether that's Israel or some other nation. And then, now he's lost a job, punished. We don't really know. They don't say. The person familiar with the breach said the intrusion was carried out by a foreign hacker who did not appear to realize that they penetrated a law enforcement server. The hacker expressed disgust at the presence of child abuse images on the device and left a message threatening to turn its owner over to the FBI. This is the really interesting part. It's like, so allegedly, according to the story, the hacker penetrates the servers, finds all this, essentially child porn, and starts trying to tell whoever, I'm going to turn you over to the FBI. Then the FBI diffused it by saying, hey, look, we are the FBI. They showed him some of their law enforcement credentials on a webcam and said, look, you're talking to the FBI. That's why we have this stuff here. And then we don't know what happened after that, what the hacker, what country they were in, what material they accessed, or whether or not any effort was made to identify or punish them for breaking into the FBI's server. So weird stuff, guys. But again, if this hack happened by some foreign nation 3 years ago, don't really believe you're getting to the bottom of this Epstein thing. This was all a limited hangout from the beginning. And one other piece to this story, kind of tangentially related, but I think it's interesting. You may have missed this, and I think the reason I'm mentioning it with Epstein is because we need to do some cross-referencing here. What I'm speaking about is this report from Dan Boguslow. I don't know him till I found this story. He's over on Substack. Exclusive, I obtained the attendance list for the Bohemian Grove. He reported this at the end of February. They did a report all about Bohemian Grove. It's interesting, and you can click here and you can download this. Of course, everything I'm talking about is going to be in the show notes. The reason I wanted to mention this is because I think what we need to do, whoever's got the time, to go cross-reference names in the Bohemian Grove list. Now, of course, this is a list just as of, I think it was 2023, 2024. So it's not like an all-time list of everybody who's ever appeared at Bohemian Grove. It's just the current members of the Bohemian Club, which owns the Bohemian Grove, which is where they have the cremation of care ritual every summer. Cross-reference that list with names from the Epstein files. I mean, I think that's going to be a big overlap, and it really shouldn't be that confusing or that difficult to imagine that people who are tied into the Bohemian Grove and sort of that kind of doing this ritual, which if you don't know anything about their ritual, you need to go to thepyramidofpower.net and watch chapter 16 on religion and secret societies, and you can learn all about the cremation of care ritual and what are the roots of the Bohemian Club. But people who are like that, who are, and as I document in that episode, that presidents have basically been chosen, presidential candidates have been chosen at the Bohemian Club. It's even been reported that the creation of the atomic bomb was discussed, and relationships were built there at the Bohemian Club, Bohemian Grove. So this is a powerful event, powerful people, and I think it's worth knowing about. So I encourage you guys to go see that chapter 16 of the Pyramid of Power at thepyramidofpower.net if you haven't yet. And if you want to help me out with this, I got a bunch of other investigations ongoing. Check out this list in the show notes, download it for yourself, and then let's start cross-referencing some names between names that have been exposed in the Epstein files and see what kind of interesting things that we come up with. I don't know. I think it's worth pursuing at least. Let me know what you guys think. Okay, so our next story here, and I appreciate you guys being here with me again tonight. Just want to mention that because I am going to kind of rush through these stories a little bit. I'm going to give them the time that they deserve, but as I shared earlier, I do have this really powerful interview with Christian Westbrook, aka Unshadowed, formerly Ice Age Farmer, and I've also got some exclusive things I want to share with you guys regarding the finders and my New Mexico reporting. So I want to make sure we get through these stories here first. This next one is all about my continued look at how the MAHA movement has been played or sold out. I mean, it's all up to your perspective and your perception, but we're going to continue to look at this. Trump's administration, an embattled FDA vaccine chief, is leaving for the second time. This was just 2 weeks ago. This is Dr. Vinay Prasad, who is for the second time leaving the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, in less than a year after he had previously departed for, as they call it, controversial decisions involving the review of vaccinations. So FDA Commissioner Marty Makary announced the news to FDA staff in an email a couple of weeks ago saying that Dr. Prasad would depart at the end of April. Makary said that he would return to his academic job at the University of California in San Francisco. Prasad was briefly forced from his job after his excuse me, where was I at? Yeah, after his running afoul of biotech executives, patient groups, and conservative allies of President Donald Trump, he was reinstated less than 2 weeks later with the backing of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Marty McCarty. So interesting thing. So this Dr. Prasad, he is somebody, I'm not very familiar with him, but from what I can see, the vaccine skeptics in our community were grateful for him being put in that position and thought this might be a good sign. This might lead to some good MAHA policies. But as they say here, he had run afoul of biotech executives, which means like mRNA shots, things like that, patients groups, and conservative allies of Trump. He was first pushed out again and then came back. And now this latest being fired, essentially, or resigning, being allowed to resign, came after a, quote, two high-profile controversies involving the FDA's review of vaccines, gene therapies, and biotech drugs, in which the companies have criticized the agency for reversing itself, in some cases calling for new trials of products which have been previously greenlighted. So what this is all about is how the FDA had previously said that they were going to allow the FDA to review a new flu vaccine from Moderna. It's an mRNA vaccine. And then they decided to not do that. And so the FDA under Dr. Prasad rejected the application from Moderna, which they call highly unusual here, which then prompted Moderna to go public with the decision and to vow to formally legally challenge it. And as it says here, in the last month, Prasad has come under fire from pharmaceutical executives, who the hell cares, investors and members of Congress, and other critics for multiple decisions at the agency. So then after the rejection of the Moderna vaccine became public, basically under pressure, who knows, from behind the scenes, the FDA reversed course and said it would accept the shot for review after all, pending a new study from Moderna. So they basically just said, okay, just do a study, tell the people you're going to do a new study and that the study says it's safe, and then we'll back off and we'll allow you in. And here you can see FDA reverses course, will review Moderna's mRNA flu vaccine. Where's Robert F. Kennedy on this? Let me just do a quick search. Did he even make anything? Let's see if he made a statement or anything about this. They mentioned his name. Nope. So they mentioned that he had canceled a $600 million government contract to develop mRNA vaccines for bird flu, which is a good thing. But at the same time, he was also promoting the measles shot. And as I've talked about in previous videos, several other mRNA shot contracts have gone forward. So what this shows to me, and what this other article here is about, is how Dr. Prasad, he's out at the FDA because he was getting in fights with biotech executives who want to push their mRNA shots. And behind the scenes, somebody pressured him and said, look, we're going to accept this next one. So the FDA then reverses course and says, okay, now we'll review Moderna's flu vaccine. First, they got to do another study. And then, like I said, it's just sort of like, hey, we got to pretend like we're doing something so that people don't revolt. But as this article over here at the New York Times, and this is just one of many, and if you're anywhere on social media, you can see this for yourselves. As Kennedy turns from vaccines, MAHA allies see a betrayal. As the midterm elections approach, the health secretary is focusing on real food, which is great. We all want real food, but at the same time, he's supporting glyphosate. Cool. I'm glad he got some red dye out of the cereal and things like that. Great. I'm not dismissing that. I think the red dye affects my nephew, if I remember correctly from what my sister told me. I understand that. But what are we going to do with our new Fruit Loops that have no red dye? We're going to pour glyphosate on them because Kennedy's embracing Trump's glyphosate executive order. And so this article just goes into talking to different activists and people who worked with Kennedy, who were in his campaign, not just random people complaining on the internet, but people who worked directly with the MAHA agenda, people who fought with him in the trenches and tried to get him elected. And then once he gave up and went to Trump, they said, all right, well, if you're going to push the MAHA agenda, then I'll vote for Trump and I'll support you. And this article is all about talking about how he is kind of sold out on it. So here's one statement here from Toby Rogers, a vaccine opponent recently named to a federal autism advisory committee. He wrote online, if Moderna flu shot is approved, the medical freedom community will abandon the Republican Party in the midterm elections. That's not a threat. That's a promise. That's the kind of stuff that we're seeing, where more and more people are, obviously, I don't think any of these elections really matter, at least not on the national federal level. But yes, go ahead, fight it on your backyard, fight for MAHA on your school board, town council, city council, what have you, like we've fought to get rid of fluoride in Houston. I totally get that. And I applaud you if you're putting in that time, because I know it's difficult. Jeffrey Tucker, president of the Brownstone Institute, he called the decision to review the mRNA shot a betrayal of the base. So this is not just Derrick Broze saying this. This is the activists out there who helped Trump get elected because they believed they were supporting RFK and his call for some kind of accountability around the COVID shots. Now, of course, as we know, Trump, on his way out of his first term, he gave Anthony Fauci a medal, presidential medal. So he's not going to go after Fauci, as he clearly has shown. He's not even going after the person who allegedly shot him in the ear, allegedly, big air quotes, because I don't trust that. And, they're praising Pfizer. Nobody is actually being held accountable. I'm glad that, sure, they're making some moves in vaccines in some areas, but let's not fool ourselves into act like real accountability is happening, because it's not. We know it's not. We don't have to lie to ourselves. We can be honest. So the reason I'm covering this story is because if you've read any of my recent articles over the last couple of months, I've been documenting this. Here's an article I did, MAHA bait and switch. Trump's EPA calls for review of fluoride science while ignoring historic ruling on fluoride. And I keep showing you these examples, how on one hand, sure, RFK will go out and make some statements, and the head of the EPA will say, we're going to do some new gold standard studies on fluoride. We're going to, do this and kind of stuff. But at the same time, they're also fighting a federal court ruling, which I went and reported for you guys in person in San Francisco back in 2024. I was the only journalist in the room when the court was, wrapping up. And eventually when the judge issued the federal ruling in September 2024, which he said, quote, fluoride at the current levels poses an unreasonable risk of reduced IQ in children. That was a historic victory. Huge, huge. The mainstream couldn't even ignore it. They just tried to attack it. And instead of following through with that court order, the Biden administration in their final days, on the EPA under Biden, they decided to appeal it, to fight it, and to try to keep fluoride in the water. So then Trump gets elected. All these MAHA people are like, yeah, well, Trump's going to go in there and undo that. Nope. Trump's administration, Trump's EPA decides they're going to keep fighting it in court. They're not going to follow. They could just abandon the appeal and just say, okay, we're going to follow what the judge said. We're going to come up with new rules on fluoride. We're just going to get it out of the water. Instead, they're still trying to fight it in court. Meanwhile, they're talking all about doing new gold standard studies. And as Michael Connett, the lead attorney, told me on here, quote, the review to determine if there is a risk is fundamentally different from what the court ordered. The court ordered the EPA to take action to eliminate risk. If the EPA thinks it can launch a new review instead of implement a rule to address fluoridation's risk, it is mistaken. But because the EPA is appealing the court's order, it does not yet have to have an obligation to abide by the court's order. So they're fighting it in court instead of actually implementing the rules. That's not MAHA. So there's that. I wrote that in January. Then there's this one. This is more related to big wireless. I wrote this last month. Can the MAHA movement overcome the influence of big wireless? And sure, Kennedy has talked about wanting to study cell phone radiation. The HHS was reported back in January by Wall Street Journal that they were going to investigate the impacts of cell phone radiation. I don't know if there's been any more official information made public yet, but they say that that's what they're going to do. And so that's a great move. But at the same time, as I point out in this article, you've got people that Trump has put in power, like Brendan Carr over at the FCC. And I talk about how big wireless has this huge influence, and that big wireless has had a huge influence on American politics for decades now, since 1996, at least, with the Telecommunications Act, when they said that you cannot regulate cell towers based on health or environmental concerns. That was put into law. And as I point out here, the FCC has now been trying to propose new rules and pass new bills which will restrict our rights as far as 5G and 6G goes even further. And this is happening because of the influence of big wireless and people like FCC Chairman Brendan Carr, who, by the way, is going to be speaking at CPAC, and I hope to speak to, who are coming directly from the wireless industry and in and out of government, part of that revolving door. And so while RFK and the HHS may have made an announcement about studying the impact of cell phone radiation, they're going to have to overcome the influence of people like Brendan Carr and big wireless. And I don't know if they can do that. So now that one might be, maybe they truly have these intentions and they really want to study it, but the influence and the corruption is too strong. I can give them that. But I think what's going to happen is they're going to produce this report, and it's going to be a big nothing burger. It's going to be like a limited hangout Shit, they might even say, sorry, we couldn't conclusively conclude that cell phones are dangerous, even though, as I talk about in my documentary, The 5G Trojan Horse, as well as what episode is it of The Pyramid of Power? I have it down here. Chapter 5, Big Wireless. You can find that at thepyramidofpower.net. I document that there's been studies since the 90s going back to 1G cell phones showing the impacts on our brains and our behavior. So I encourage you guys to check that out. But I do think that's another area where MAHA is not going to be able to overcome these corporate interests. You got the fluoride lobby, you got the big wireless lobby, and then my most recent one here, biotech and pesticide corporations are winning under Trump's second administration, which is kind of it's about MAHA, but it's also kind of a part two, because I did another article last year about how the big tech and AI firms are, quote unquote, winning under Trump's second administration. It's not the people that are winning, it is these corporations. And this is, of course, after Trump issued the executive order to protect glyphosate-based herbicides. And I covered this in a previous video, so I won't repeat myself. But the point being, there's all these examples of MAHA being lied to, being played, or the characters who claim to be MAHA selling out. And guys, you're not going to win through politics. I know some of you are still trying your best, and you're still thinking that you can just go vote your way out of this. We discovered a worldwide network, and we've known for years, of pedophiles, of child abusers, of financial criminals, on and on and on. And you really think that you're going to vote them out, my friends? These are people who pull false flags, who fake pandemics, who stage shootings, who are willing to start wars, rob the people blind. And you really think you're going to vote your way out of the situation, my friend? You're not, unfortunately. But that doesn't have to be a black pill. I know that can be overwhelming for some of you, but in my view, it is actually a beautiful white pill. It is the acceptance that we have to take care of ourselves. We can't rely on anybody else anymore. We have to take care of ourselves, our own lives, our own families, our own communities. That's the answer. And if you've listened to my work for some time, you know that the solution that I promote, besides voting, because if voting is not going to work, and if complaining on the internet's not going to work, it's not going to work, then what are we left with? Most people would just throw their hands up and say, well, apathy, right? Black pill, YOLO, who cares? Let's just get drunk, get high, and party it off, and screw the future generations. But that's not the real solution, my friends. The solution that I believe in is called exit and build strategy. And I've been talking about this for at least 6 years now, when I published my book, How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State, which you can download for free at theconsciousresistance.com/how-to, theconsciousresistance.com/how-to, or you can go to theconsciousresistance.com/exb, and you can see this challenge I put together, 45-day exit and build challenge, to learn more about this concept, theconsciousresistance.com/exb. And this is a 45-day, 7-week challenge that goes over food, money, technology, land, education and knowledge, mindset and habits, and how to think holistically about all of this. And I really think anybody who truly takes this and participates in it is going to find real change in their life. And I've got the quotes and the appreciation and the emails and the messages from people to prove it, guys. So if you realize that things are heading in a bad direction and you're tired of just hearing about how fucked up the world is and you actually want to do something about it, maybe consider exit and build, because voting's not going to fix it. And I know some people are like, Derrick, we just need to pull out the guillotines. We need to start the violent revolution, the insurrection, and that will fix these people. Look, we may get to that point. I'm not at that point. And if you want to be the first to do it, go ahead. Let's see if you can lead the revolution. I think taking those kind of steps just leads us inevitably in circles and endless cycles where we keep repeating the same mistakes that humanity has done time and time again. We become the very monsters that we are trying to fight. And instead, what we need to focus on is creating the world that we want to see and creating the lives that we want to see for ourselves. It's not so much about running away from the bad things, although it is partially because we're aware, hey, they're trying to build a crazy world that I don't believe in. Well, then let's focus on creating the world that we do want to see, right? So don't think about it so much as running away from the bad, but choosing to focus on what you actually want to see in the world. And for me, that is exit and build strategy. We're focused on building parallel systems, new systems for the coming generations and beyond, because that's what's going to help humanity, not continuing to play these stupid games over and over, voting, yada, 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 thinking we're making a difference when we're just wasting everybody's time. So that's my spiel. Again, theconsciousresistance.com/exb for the 45-day exit and build challenge, theconsciousresistance.com/how-to for a link to purchase or download for free my book, How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State. Now, this article here I found on Slay News, which sometimes is kind of tabloidy and not really my thing, but I have found some interesting things here. Israeli minister's daughter found dead after accusing powerful elites of ritualistic child abuse. I'd never heard of any of this. A daughter of a top Israeli official has been found dead after she publicly accused her family members and other powerful elites of ritualistic child abuse. The disturbing case out of northern Israel is raising questions after the young woman was found dead under unclear circumstances. So Shoshana Strook, 34, the daughter of Israeli National Missions Minister Orit Strook, was found dead at her home on Sunday, March 15th, 2026, so a week ago. And it says here authorities have confirmed investigations underway. You can see here on J-Post. However, no official cause of death has been disclosed. Here you go. Daughter of National Missions Minister Orit Strook found dead. Police investigate case. Now, do they make a mention that she had talked about abuse in her family? Yeah, it says in recent months, she had been speaking out about sexual abuse from her parents and ritual abuse that she experienced as a child. She talked about this on multiple social media posts, as Jerusalem Post and Slay News talks about here. Before her death, she made explosive allegations about her mother, father, and brother, accusing them of sexual abuse beginning in her childhood. She said this included trafficking and involved ritualistic ceremonies allegedly attended by powerful and influential figures in Israel. In February, video Strook said the abuse began when she was just 2 years old and that she was taken to ceremonies and is subjected to manipulation through drugs, hypnosis, and sexual exploitation. That sounds like some MK Ultra stuff. She claimed her father had been exploiting her in Tel Aviv when she was 13 years old. And there's a video of her right there. In April 2025, she said in a statement that she filed a complaint in Italy, hoping to get some relief. And she filed a report with the police. And we don't know if anything actually happened. But while that was ongoing, she ends up being found dead in a case that is still being investigated under mysterious circumstances. So, yeah, I mean, these kind of cases, the reason I'm even mentioning it is, like, I'm sure most of you have never heard of this. This isn't huge breaking news, everything going on. But I do think it's important to talk about. It's important to mention, to at least acknowledge, and to try to keep up with. I'm going to follow this story. And in fact, let's just go ahead over to Google, CIA Google, and see what they say when I search her name. Whenever you hear me say that, it's because the CIA venture capital firm Incutel was part of the Google's first seed funding, just like with Palantir and others. That's why I say that. And the reason I do this instead of using a better search engine like Presearch or SeerX or some of these others that are privacy-based is because I want to see what the mainstream is telling people. And yeah, you can see when you search her name, Israel's minister's daughter found dead. So it is kind of getting out there, mainly on social media. It's not like it's on Reddit, it's on Twitter, elsewhere. Let's go ahead here and see what this Reddit says. So there's not really a lot out there, but you can see, let's just search in the news, that she is a real person. This is being discussed in some places, mainly alternative type media. Let's see what they have on Reddit over here. Her Wikipedia article is up for deletion days after she was found dead. Wow. I wonder if that's true. Here, let me see if I can pull this Wikipedia article. Yeah, it says this editor has nominated this article for deletion. You are welcome to participate in the deletion discussion, which will decide whether to keep it. Why would they want to delete this after her death? And they have allegations of abuse mentioned here. They have her death mentioned. Of course, Netanyahu said, we received this death with deep sadness. And after her death, her rabbi rejected her allegations that ritual abuse occurs in Israel. Of course, it never happens. Couldn't possibly happen in Israel. So Shoshana Strook, guys, let's stay on this story. Send me an email, send me a message if you guys got more information on this. It's pretty new to me. And the reason I wanted to talk about that and sort of lead into my next story is because if you followed my work on the Finders, you know that there's a connection with the Finders cult and ritualistic abuse and child abuse and ritualistic abuse, child abuse that involves the intelligence agencies. And that's what we're going to talk about now. This is just going to be a brief one. And what I'm going to show you in just a moment is going to be some exclusive footage that I bought through a news archive I found. I spent, I think, $90 on this, guys. So if you want to support me, the money goes to things like this to do real journalism. It literally cost me $34 for one video, 2-minute video, and another $67 for 2 more videos that were also about 1.5 to 2 minute long. And I compiled them together in sequential order, chronological order, and I'm going to play those for you in just a moment. If you're totally unfamiliar, you don't know what I'm talking about with the finders, go to theconsciousresistance.com, look for our finders tab, and you'll see my documentary, Who Will Find What the Finders Hide. I've also recently been doing some interviews. I was on Jake Shields' podcast talking about this. I was recently on InfoWars talking to my friend Kriston Harris, who is subbing for Harrison Smith, about this. And I did a video recently about whether or not there is finally a proven connection between the Epstein network and the finders. And I encourage you to go back and watch that, because I will have an update on that soon. I've had people start to reach out to me about the connection I found in there. And I did interview former member of the finders, Toby Terrell, 2 times, first back in 2018 and then again in 2021. And he passed away about 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago. So I'm kind of opening up my old finders files. I started to read articles that I've had on the finders, and I started to file new FOIA requests, open records requests in the state of Virginia, because some of you might remember that part of the finders story was that this cult, this group had a farm in rural Virginia. You know, they had a warehouse in DC, apartments in DC, they got caught in Florida, and then they had this farm in Virginia. And I found some articles where they specifically say that the Virginia Department of Transportation brought in a backhoe and dug up some dirt looking for potential bodies on the finders' farms. And so I thought, well, shoot, there's got to be records of that. So I filed a record asking, did the Department of Transportation in Virginia have anything? No, sorry, we don't have anything. They mentioned the local police department. I filed an open records request to the local police department. Again, dead end. I mean, I've filed multiple open records requests in the last month or two. I think it was 6 in total, 3 in Virginia, and then a couple elsewhere, Culpeper, Virginia, as well as another one where I was trying to find a list. There was a story I found where an attorney who was representing a former member of the finders in a divorce case said that he had been harassed by members of the finders who were like stalking him and like creeping him out. So he filed in court a restraining order, and he actually included a list of members of the finders. And I thought, that's kind of an interesting way to find that information. So I started trying to find those records. Those records might still exist, but I might need somebody in Culpeper, Virginia, to go to a local library. I could tell you where to go. It's going to be tedious work because we got to dig through file cabinets because this information has not been digitized. And maybe it'll amount to nothing. That's kind of how, journalism goes sometimes. But it could be a lead to more leads, basically. So I am still on this finders case. And again, if you're not familiar with it, go to theconsciousresistance.com, look up my finders documentary, watch the addendum, which is basically kind of a part 2 that is from the Pyramid of Power. It's a section of the Pyramid of Power. So if you watch my documentary from 2019, and the addendum, then you'll be caught up. But I've got so much material on the finders from over the years. If you want to get caught up and you're new to this, go check that out there. And so what I'm going to play for you now, though, is going to be these video clips that I found. These are local news clips. You'll even see Dan Rather from 1987. This is from the original finders case when these men, well-dressed men, were arrested in Tallahassee, Florida. The kids were taken by the police. They were accused of abusing these kids. The men claimed they were taking the children to a school for brilliant children in Mexico. I won't go on because you're going to get all the explanation in these clips. But the reason I paid for these and I wanted to archive them and share them with you guys is because I think it's important that we collect this information, that we allow this stuff to exist, not hidden in archives, not elsewhere. So I'm putting it out there now. Download it, put it up on your files and your channels and everywhere else. And let's make sure that this story doesn't die. So what you're going to see is 3 news reports. One is the first day when the men were arrested. One is the day after, the second day the men were arrested. And then one is a couple days later. And so you'll kind of see how the story evolved in the days after the men's arrest. So check this out. These are 3 original reports from 1987 from mainstream news on the finders cult.
What is known tonight is this: authorities have the children and the 2 men accused of abusing those children, and evidence that they may be only part of a larger, dreadful story. CBS News correspondent Rita Braver reports.
Law enforcement authorities suspect they may have stumbled on an international child abuse ring when an anonymous call led police in Tallahassee, Florida, to this park. 2 well-dressed men were discovered with 6 filthy, ragged, insect-bitten children, aged 2 to 6.5. A passerby with a home video camera took these pictures as the men were arrested and booked for child abuse. The children were confused, said they'd been traveling for a long time in a van, stopping at camps. Today, police released these photographs, hoping to learn more about the 6 youngsters who said they didn't know where they came from or where they were going.
At least one of the 6 were sexually abused.
The 2 men reportedly told police the children were being weaned from their mothers and taken to Mexico for a special school for brilliant children. Papers the men were carrying led to Washington, D.C., where police last night searched a residence used by a commune or cult known as the Finders.
The women are always pregnant, and they have a child, and then they seem like they get pregnant again.
And there was another search at this Finders warehouse where law enforcement authorities said they found a photographic studio, a computer bank, and at least 3 large bags full of slides showing, according to one source, satanic, ritualistic activities involving torture, bloodletting, and sexually explicit acts involving children. Virginia police are now investigating a farm where the group reputedly brought children.
Well, it looked like to me that was awful, didn't weigh very much.
You don't think they were well cared for then?
I think they were malnutrition.
No members of the Finders were apprehended, but police say they do have some leads. The FBI and U.S. Customs Service have now joined the investigation, and officials say they're still trying to figure out exactly what is going on and how these and perhaps other children may be involved. Rita Braver, CBS News, Washington.
6 children in the custody of Tallahassee police in an alleged child abuse case have been moved and put under guard after police received a number of threats against the children's safety. 2 men have been arrested and charged after Tallahassee police uncovered a widespread cult that appears to involve devil worship. The story now from Luke McCarthy.
These 6 children are at the heart of a bizarre tale of alleged abuse and possible devil worship. The arrests of 2 men in Tallahassee have touched off investigations from Florida to Washington, D.C. Douglas Ammerman and Michael Houlihan are charged with child abuse. Police say the children found with them were hungry, dirty, covered with insect bites, and there's evidence one child was sexually abused. Tallahassee police said today there have been threatening phone calls.
Evidently, someone found out where these children were staying, called and said that there was going to be physical harm brought to the children.
The men in custody told police the children were being weaned from their mothers. The group apparently traveled by van from Washington, D.C.
The organization is probably some type of satanic cult, according to the Washington, D.C. officials, and a prerequisite of joining this group is to give up the rights to your children.
Evidence led to 2 locations in Washington operated by a commune, possibly a cult, called the Finders. D.C. police seized computer and video equipment, as well as photographs from a warehouse. According to a police source, the pictures show rituals involving children, animals, and bloodletting. A neighbor of this Finder's home recognized several of the 6 children and said the girl who calls herself Mary talked about the Finder's lifestyle.
She used to say that she slept out back on the porch, and her and the little kids slept in a tent.
In Madison County, Virginia, state police raided several locations linked to the Finders and found nothing. Authorities are looking for 2 other vans, possibly carrying more children. And they're looking for answers to what the Finders believe and whether those beliefs are criminal. Lark McCarthy, ABC News, Washington.
A week after the arrest of 2 men in Florida found with 6 bedraggled-looking children, the FBI said today some of the parents had been interviewed. All involved appear to be part of a mysterious, non-traditional lifestyle group called the Finders. Police have rolled back on Satanism and sex charges, but the case still is raising some serious questions. Rita Braver has been investigating.
In Tallahassee, Florida tonight, 6 children still wait. No one has come forward to claim them, and their story grows more confused and bizarre. The 2 men arrested last week and charged with child abuse when police responded to an anonymous call complaining of the youngsters' filthy and neglected appearance, today pleaded not guilty, but explained nothing. Law enforcement officials now believe the men and children were on some sort of expedition and that all are part of a Washington-based alternate lifestyle community called the Finders. The group is known for its secrecy and unconventional lifestyle. Police have now backed off charges that one of the children was sexually abused and that pictures seized from Finders headquarters in Washington were pornographic. Still, there is concern that the children are being raised in a harmful atmosphere. Case in point, photographs showing the children participating in the slaughter of 2 goats. A Finder spokesman who refused to appear on camera defended the episode.
They watched them get dissected. They were allowed to touch whatever they wanted to touch. And it seems to me that that would be a marvelous learning experience to discover the womb of a goat and see a couple of little fetuses inside.
The Finders claim that regaining custody of the children is being worked on, but won't explain how. This woman says she's one of the mothers, but won't give her name. She says the group is just being targeted because it's different.
Granted, we have an alternative lifestyle. We're different from Mr. and Mrs. America next door, but we love our children.
Florida authorities say that when and if the Finders do try to claim the children, they could be considered unfit parents and denied custody. It's the kind of question that's difficult for society.
As long as parents are providing their children with both the education and with the physical and emotional sustenance to function adequately as adults, what kinds of role models they provide or what kinds of settings that is done in is not of concern to the state.
The dispute is likely to end up in court. Meanwhile, the children wait. Rita Braver, CBS News, Washington.
So there you have it. That is extremely rare footage of the Finders cult. As I said, I'll be putting that video out separately, all on its own. And if you want to know more about that, again, the best place is to go to our website, theconsciousresistance.com, and to check out our Finders cult page that has every report I've done for the last 6 or 7 years here. And also, just one quick thing, while I was watching that video, recording this, I got a breaking news sent to me in one of my channels related to the last story we just covered about the Israeli minister's daughter who made pedophile cult allegations. Google now under fire for scrubbing abuse claims. This saying that apparently, let's get to the Google stuff. As her story spread online, users report that news about her death have been scrubbed or buried. Social media platforms and search engine appear to be removing or downranking posts, leading to speculation about deliberate censorship. And of course, that's what I was just showing you guys a moment ago. They're talking about deleting her page off of Wikipedia. Apparently, Google may be suppressing this. And this is how these kinds of stories, like I just showed you with the Finders story, disappear in real time. Because when the Finders story broke, it was international news. And if you heard from the first report to the second one, first it was one of the doctors said there's clear signs of sexual abuse of the children. And then within days, they're like, nope, never mind. That was all just a mistake here. And so if you think because we have the internet, they can't keep things from us, that's true to some degree. But also the scrubbing, the misdirection, the lies happen in real time now. So we will keep an eye on Shoshana Strook's story as well as the Finders. Now, one more story before we get to our discussion with Christian Westbrook, formerly known as Ice Age Farmer, all about Iran. And this is going to be a good interview you guys do not want to miss. This is my latest article. Mexico's central bank, the Bank of International Settlements, and BlackRock discuss phasing out cash and the future of digital money. This was at the 89th Banking Convention, just happened last week, March 18th through the 20th. And Justin Trudeau was there, former Canadian Prime Minister, of course, Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum. And as I said in the title, people from BlackRock, people from Mexico's central bank, all of the different representatives of the big banks in Mexico, the CEO of Visa, one of the vice chairs of MasterCard. And they had panels talking about central bank digital currencies, stable coins. They had panels titled Sustainable Financing Risks and Opportunities. They had one called Infrastructure Investment as a Catalyst for Growth, including the director of BlackRock Mexico. Most importantly, they had panels talking about the future of money, what's next for Mexico and the world, including the guy from the BIS. And then they had one called The Role of Artificial Intelligence in the Future of Digital Payments. And then as I was reporting this article last Thursday, I was writing about how the head of this organization, the ABM that organized this event, he had already kind of started to paint the picture of what this is really about. He said, his name is Emilio Romano. He said the central bank is preparing to publish protocols to drive the adoption of payments sent by mobile phones. He also said authorities are studying separate measures that could include eliminating cash for some services and products such as gas stations and toll roads. And he said that for those who don't know, Mexico, roughly 85% of people in the country, small transactions are done in cash. And that is largely because Mexicans don't trust the government and they're seeking to avoid taxation. And this guy said, quote, easing concerns about how the government assesses income will help. And so they're trying to rebuild trust like we know the World Economic Forum's been doing for years. And then that night, Thursday night, Scheinbaum gives this talk where she says, I'm going to play you guys the video, but I'll tell you what she says in English ahead of time. Our goal is that this year we make it mandatory to pay for gasoline and toll booths digitally. And then she starts to say the next sentence, and you're going to notice all these seals start clapping. I mean, it's a room full of bankers, so of course they're cheering. She says, this will allow us to promote accessible digital payments that will allow us to advance the digitization of the country through many other schemes. So let's go ahead and take a quick look. This is Claudia Sheinbaum, president of Mexico, talking about trying to get rid of cash in Mexico.
Nuestro objetivo es que este año, a través de los esquemas que trabajemos con la banca, hagamos obligatorio el pago de las gasolinas y de las casetas a través de manera digital. Esto va a permitir potenciar los pagos digitales accesibles que nos permitan avanzar en la digitalización del país a través de muchos otros esquemas.
Muchos otros esquemas. So she's talking about as many schemes as they can to push this through. And then, of course, there was Juan Pablo de Botón, the Secretary of the Administration and Finance of Mexico City. He also put out a piece talking about how they're trying to advance optimization of digital payments ecosystem in Mexico City. And this is all coming on the backs of how Mexico has been pushing for their biometric CURP, which is kind of like a social security card in the US. And they're saying everybody's going to need a biometric CURP, scanning of your face, taking all your fingerprints in order to have normal services like phone and internet service. They're saying it's going to be used for schooling, for healthcare, all kinds of things. And what I'm showing you on screen, this is one of the Mexican companies, Bait. This is the notification. It says register your Bait line before June 29, 2026 with your CURP and your INE, which is your official identification. You need your INE, your passport, or your CURP Biometric. So basically they're saying you need to register your phone line, and they're claiming, like all sorts of things, this is about trying to end anonymity on phone lines, because in Mexico, you can just go walk in and buy a SIM card and just activate it. You don't have to show ID. You can be anonymous in that way. And they're saying, well, the cartels use this, so we have to get rid of it. So now we need everybody to register biometrics. And according to one Mexican journalist that I found here, Ignacio Gomez Villaseñor, he said that less than 10% of Mexican phone lines have been registered. And the deadline, we're here at March 23rd. So this is just April, May, June, 3 months away. They're claiming they're going to have tens of millions of people across this country on this system. And they're saying if you don't sign up, they're going to cut your service. But according to this journalist, less than 10% of Mexican phone lines have actually been registered. He says, quote, it's completely unfeasible for companies to cancel numbers not associated with the CURP. They would be left without customers. The issue has escalated to the point that they are analyzing campaigns to try to discredit the real concerns of experts. And he concluded, I insist, don't register. We're beating the government. So, I've been in Mexico for 6 years now, and I have land here. We're building our community, not because I thought Mexico was going to be immune from these agendas forever. I think anybody who thinks there's anywhere in the world that's going to be immune is silly. It's happening, right? But I do think it'll take longer in Mexico. They can make all the announcements they want. And there's some people like, oh my God, Mexico's screwed. Mexico's cooked. Chill, calm your horses. Governments make announcements all the time in Mexico and parts of Latin America, and that doesn't necessarily always translate to reality because a lot of people, again, don't trust the government. So government can claim what they want. Let's see how it actually plays out in real life, because I don't think they're going to have as easy as a time as they think they're going to. Nevertheless, I will keep following this story with you guys. Of course, I live here in Mexico, so I'm going to experience it firsthand. And you better believe that myself and my community, both local community as well as the Conscious Agora Eco Village we're building, we're having discussions about, okay, what if they do cut off our internet? What if they do cut off our phone? What are we going to do? What are alternatives? And I think all of you need to be having those conversations because it's coming to a country near you soon. So now we are at our final story of the night, guys. We're going to talk about Iran. We're going to talk to Christian Westbrook of Unshadowed in just a moment. I just wanted to share a couple of things as we get to that point. As I talked about earlier, I had this debate recently with Naomi Wolf, where she was really trying to tug on the heartstrings that Iranians want the U.S. to be bombing their country. They want to be saved from, their tyranny of their own government. And my arguments were nothing about defending the government, of course. It's just about that the U.S. doesn't have a reason to be involved there. And sure, as I told Naomi Wolf, you can find some videos of Iranians who are cheering and saying, mostly these Iranians outside of the country saying, yes, the U.S. is bombing them. Good, go after the bad, evil people. But you can also find Iranians in the country who are not cheering it on and who are completely against it. So I don't think it's as black and white as Miss Wolf would like things to be. But I did find this interesting article from the Financial Times. Iranians rethink the price of regime change. Destructive U.S. and Israeli war and Islamic Republic's resistance have alarmed even those who supported foreign intervention. And so they interview some Iranians who are saying that, they were afraid of their government and their government killing people. Beheadings and hangings do happen. And they talked to a woman. Her name is Mandana, who, is using a pseudonym and doesn't give her a full name. But she says, this was about a week ago, we weren't supposed to be bombed. Her voice trembling after a massive explosion near her apartment by Vanak Square in central Tehran. Our city, our country, this wasn't supposed to happen. How is it that Venezuela saw a clean but bloodless regime, but not here? And so there's other people, saying similar things like, hey, I thought that we were going to be saved. And now Trump's saying he's going to bomb the hell out of Iran and that it'll never recover. How is that looking out for us? And even as we're talking right now, Trump and them are talking about bombing Iran's facilities. And so this will be in the show notes as well as this too, which are a little more relevant to my conversation with Christian. War in Iran threatens fresh food price shocks across developing world, of course, because of fertilizers, because of gas shipments. This one here is saying attacks on major oil and gas sites in the Middle East. So, if Trump and his people truly cared about the Iranians, they wouldn't be bombing this infrastructure. Yes, of course, the idea is that you try to starve the regime. But as always with wars like this, it is the regular people that will suffer. So for the people cheering this on, as the U.S. bombs parts of Iran and tries to hit different targets, and then Iran responds and bombs people in Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Syria, Israel, and United Arab Emirates and elsewhere to try to get back at the U.S., again, it is the regular people who will suffer. So that is what I told Naomi Wolf. But the question of the day now that we're going to discuss with Christian Westbrook is there really a bigger picture going on? And lots of people think that there is. They think that what we're witnessing is just another evolution of the so-called Great Reset, that what we think we're seeing is just a war between Israel and Iran and, their allies. But myself, like others out there, I've been skeptical of those narratives for years, because when you understand that the same banking class helped the Russian Revolution 100 years ago, helped Russia become what it is, and the same banking class and the Kissingers and the technocrats helped China become what it is, and the same bankers continue to control the U.S., and the same banking class helped found and fund Israel, you start to realize, and the same thing applies to Iran, that maybe there's actually not a war going on between these people. Yes, real people are dying, and that's real, but maybe there's something else going on that we're not being shown the full picture, and we need to question it. And more importantly, what are we going to do about it? What's going to happen if the food prices do skyrocket, if things like fertilizer are no longer available? These are the questions I asked Christian Westbrook in this exclusive interview. So guys, please check this out, and I'll be back to wrap up the show in about 45 minutes. Thank you. All right, everyone. I am here with a friend and a returning guest, Christian Westbrook, Unshadowed, formerly known as Ice Age Farmer. Thanks for joining me today, brother, on such short notice.
I'm thrilled to be here, Derek. Thanks for the conversation.
Yeah, so, the reason I wanted to reach out to you is I consider you to be one of the foremost experts, if you'll allow me to use that word, in this particular area of research that we're going to discuss today, which is, how world events, geopolitical events impact food, of course, which is something you've covered for years now, but also the inputs that relate to food. So whether that's fuel, different fertilizers, things like that, and how that, of course, plays into what people see on their local grocery shelves, what they can, what they see at their local gas stations, things like that. And it seems like more and more people are starting to question the narrative of this war with Iran, not only in the sense of just being anti-war and like this is senseless and doesn't make any sense, but is there some sort of larger narrative going on that seems to play right into some of the same agendas that you and myself and others have been talking about since COVID and prior to that. So maybe before we get into some of your recent reports, you could share your analysis on what you're seeing with the Iran war and how it plays into the bigger picture.
Definitely. So what started this week was that I was looking at sort of the way that countries were reacting across the world, and right away you start to notice that there's strikingly similar measures being implemented at breakneck speed around the world, almost the same language in a lot of the announcements. And it really feels like COVID, right? It really feels like when these countries, it was not a bottom-up solution, like, oh, there's a pandemic. How are we as a sovereign nation going to come to, rise to the occasion and deal with this? It was clearly a top-down scripted thing. And then eventually the script surfaced, even as the Rockefeller lockstep documents revealed all the social distancing, even using the same, coronavirus in advance. So I think by now that's been pretty well understood to have been something that was a scripted and engineered crisis that was used very much to achieve the goals of the technocrats. And that's exactly the sense that that started developing this week as we saw those countries implement these same energy conservation measures, but also using a lot, even in some cases explicitly invoking the same language about locking people down, both in government officials saying the word lockdown and in media reports saying lockdown style. I don't have any of those headlines pulled up, but you can just find there are people saying lockdown style measures in order.
I've seen like Vietnam and Denmark like encouraging stay-at-home orders to conserve gas and stuff like that. Is that what you're referencing?
Some people explicitly use the word lockdown, but that's exactly among the steps that are being recommended. And not only, so it's been like a series of discoveries this week as I've done these reports. Not only were those steps that you're mentioning, and then some others like certainly rationing access to fuel, limiting who's allowed to use the roads based on whether or not you have an even or an odd license plate, which sort of brings, in the US, that reminds you of like the 80s, the fuel crisis then. But now it's access to the roads. So you'll only be allowed to drive one of your, if you have one car, you're only allowed to be on the road half the time, which of course sets the stage eventually for the elimination of private car ownership and shared, always taking an Uber or whatever.
And it sounds familiar to some of the things we've seen talked about in the past with so-called 15-minute cities and things like that. Or, before there was like, okay, only within this perimeter of the city, you can't drive or do this. There are only people, like you said, with odd or even number license plates. But now this is kind of going even beyond that.
Absolutely. And yes, you beat me to the punch there. Yeah, exactly. This sets the stage for narrowing the transportation freedom. And that's why I was so interested when you posted that report about Mexico going completely digital, not only with just purchases of fuel, but the toll roads. So you're literally able to track people where they're going, and eventually it's very much Hunger Games-esque, like which zones they're allowed into. But so that speaks directly to the 15-minute cities. And you already see, for example, in Denmark, their prime minister got up there and said, he was literally begging people, saying, quote, please, please, please do not drive unless it's absolutely necessary. And so the steps that were recommended, one of these, it was the International Energy Association, the IEA, came out a few days ago, and they had a series of 10 steps that they recommended that member countries take. But even countries in Asia are taking these same steps. We can go through those if you want. It was like you said.
Yeah, I got some of your reports here. I'm going to pull up. I just want to mention, since you brought up Mexico, for those who haven't seen that, I'll be talking more about it. And I did put an article out last week, but there was this big banking convention here in Mexico, in Cancun, and you had BlackRock, you had the head of BIS, Bank of International Settlements, Mexico, the head of the Mexican Central Bank, Justin Trudeau, was here for some reason. And they were already kind of talking about the future of digital money. But then the big announcement was Thursday evening, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum gave a speech where she made it clear, according to them, which I just still can't fathom, but according to them, by the end of this year, they're going to phase out cash when it comes to gas stations and to toll booths. And, the reason the toll booths is kind of even a bigger move if they do actually try this is because in Mexico, tolls are pretty much everywhere. I mean, so it's not like the US where you have, the regular freeways that you can pretty much drive on freely. And then there's some roads, if you want to go faster, you pay tolls. Like pretty much all the roads that most people use in Mexico are toll roads. There are free roads as well, but they're not maintained. They're much longer routes than you would take on the toll roads, and they can in some places be less secure in terms of safety. So vast majority of the country chooses to use the toll roads, and those toll roads already can be expensive, and it's it's a whole thing all to its own. But that is, in my view, is just another example of how they find these little squeeze points where they know, well, people want to use these roads, they're better, they're safer, they're faster, etc. That's a way for us to try to push our agendas. So we'll see how that plays out. But let me go ahead and pull up your Substack here. And for those who haven't been following you, of course, we did an interview a couple months ago. I'll put the link below. If you're not following Christian over on Substack or YouTube or elsewhere, or on Telegram, Unshadowed. And I'll just pull a few headlines that you covered recently. Engineered shortages and austerity rolling out fast. You talk about Slovenia. And I'll let you get into these. 2 weeks to flatten the fuel curve, digital IDs, rationing, energy austerity. I think you covered this one too. Pakistan schools closing because of war is not in. Like, there's all kinds of different things going on here. So sort of walk us through what you're seeing. Like I guess first off, let's take a step back before we get into the micro level of all these scenes. Do you think the war is, I don't want to say engineered per se, but do you think that this is being done as just another cover for rolling out these agendas, or is it just coincidentally playing right into the technocrats' hands? Because, there are some people who believe that COVID itself was just cover for economic collapse that was ongoing, things just another way to use, to push the agendas, obviously. And then there were others who thought, well, no, there is something real going on, but they're taking advantage of it. Like, where do you fall on that? Do you think the whole war, not to say the war is fake, which I don't believe, but do you think the narrative, though, of the reasons the war taking place is just cover for that larger Agenda 2030 technocratic state?
I do. So my personal belief, and I will also qualify it as you just did, that clearly there are really people dying, and this is terrible, right? There's terrible things going on, and just because it's part of an agenda doesn't mean that it's any less terrible or that there aren't people dying. I'm not saying everything is fake and nothing ever happens. But yes, I think that, there was the 2008 financial crisis where things got crazy enough that the governments had to step in and buy all the sovereign debt. And then things sort of escalated from there until 2020. It was getting undeniable again, and they had to throw a pandemic to cover that up, institute more emergency measures, and kick the can a bit further. And now I think the wall is so crazy that, as Gerald Celente says, when all else fails, they take you to war. And so that provides the cover for the economic collapse that we're facing and the situation there. And yes, as well, it is as usual, the technocrats have multiple, they function stack, to use the permaculture term. They have multiple goals that they accomplish with most of their actions. And so this is an excuse for the financial collapse that was going to happen, so that people don't get mad at the leadership and blame them. And then, yes, obviously it plays directly into implementing all of these. So disturbing the energy system. Right now, they've already stopped, 20% of the LNG supply is offline and will be for 3 to 5 years, because they've destroyed so many of the facilities, particularly in Qatar, or Qatar, whichever you prefer. And although a lot of those, the 8 to 10% of oil that's offline right now and not being exported is not being exported because it's stopped, because there's no getting it out, so they've just been holding on to it. It's not getting out of the strait there. And so some of that capacity could come online, but yeah, there's lasting damage that's being done to the infrastructure here. So that is giving them the cover story to say, oh, we've got an energy crisis. And there's so much to talk about here. Part of what I've been looking at this week is that, for example, there are posts from a Dutch barge captain who has a whole barge full of biodiesel. He was routed to, I think, Antwerp, and then sat there for 2 weeks, and then was rerouted somewhere else. And now he's been sitting there for a week and a half, and he tweets, like, this is ridiculous. Like, they're raising the cost of fuel, and here I am not being allowed to unload my cargo. And there's went pretty viral in Dutch circles and in other parts of Europe. Among the replies there was one guy who works at the ports, and he's saying, thank God that someone else in this space is talking about this. We are not allowing anyone to unload or load fuel here in my port right now. And this is so if you trace back the timeline that the captain outlined, that actually takes the genesis of his just sitting in the port back to before most of this energy destruction happened. So the shortages are that they're, you know, the shortages that they're now using as the basis for all of these. Slovenia saying we're rationing your goods, Portugal saying we're rationing things, and we're going to ask you to cut your even residential energy usage 20%. The UK saying we're going to turn off lights at night. You're not going to be allowed to cool your beer in the pubs at night. We're going to ration fuel, close gas stations. There's a whole, the list is quite long, but it is the same series of steps across all of these countries because it's being dictated from the top. And all of that is being done, even as it turns out, the fuel has been sitting in ports since before this crisis apparently was created by the war. So that's troubling. And then another sign of this being a very scripted situation comes out of Australia, where there was, about a week ago, I did a report on some of the media coverage out of Australia that said there's fuel shortages and they're doing rationing at the gas stations. And there was, among that media coverage, there was one gem where abc.net.au interviewed the manager of one of the fuel wholesalers. So this is the guy who purchases, in this case, from BP, a bunch of fuel, and then his customers are the gas stations. And he's quoted in ABC News as saying, BP, I was directed by BP, who of course is very tightly, a big company with lots of globalist connections, owned by State Street and Vanguard and so forth. BP directed him not to release any more than 50% of the gas station's orders to his customers. And they said, if you don't honor this, we're going to cut you off completely. So he said, this is out of my hands. I can only give the gas stations half of their orders, which of course sets the stage for shortages. And then since I've done that report, I've heard from a number of people in Australia who said, this is crazy, because at the same time this was apparently happening, the media was going on TV and saying, hey, everybody, you better go stock up on fuel right now. Prices are going to go up, so go get it while you can. So this combination of telling people to buy things, but then also restricting supply, clearly leads to a situation where they're running out. And once that happened, then the premier, I think it's Chris Minns, gets on TV and says, well, wouldn't you know, we've got shortages. It's because of all this panic buying. And now we're going to have to institute rationing. And so the fact that they've gone through this series of steps, and like we said, there is destruction going on. There is a lot of energy infrastructure that has been eliminated, and then a good portion of it that's offline because of the Strait, which could be taken back online with some delay. And we haven't even talked about the fertilizer yet either. So there is a legitimate bit of the world energy markets that's being impacted. But as well, they're engineering things and creating these optics to make things worse, to further justify the implementation of these measures.
Yeah, it's a lot happening here. I'm going to go ahead and show some of the headlines that you reference here. This is just BBC, so mainstream news. Slovenia becomes first EU country to introduce fuel rationing. Then we got Time, how countries are responding to the Iran's war, emerging energy crisis. And as I said, you've got some reports here, engineered shortages and austerity rolling out fast. So I mean, I want to cover a few more headlines, but I also want to, as you know, I mean, I think by this point, my audience, your audience, people who've been following either of our work are aware of these kind of things and are watching the Iran war with hesitancy and skepticism and concern every time they see, okay, a new oil field's been bombed, or these things that seem to play perfectly into the hands of people who don't want there to be, for one, private ownership of vehicles. That seems to be one of their main planks, Agenda 2030, that they don't want the people to have the freedom that comes along with being able to grow their food. And like you said, there's fertilizer, there's other inputs. Obviously, gas itself plays into equipment for growing food and things like that. Do you have any, just to start off before we go further into some of the bad news and some of the concerns, like what would you say if you just had a handful of tips right now people should be doing? I mean, I know we've talked about this in previous interviews where you went from having your big farm to, now kind of doing things on a more personal level. What can somebody do right now who's hearing this and it maybe is 100% dependent on their local big box grocery store, or is living in an apartment in a major city or something like that, and hears these things and they're with us and they're listening, but they also just don't know what to do? Like what, should they start stocking up on certain types of food or certain types of items that might be useful in these emergencies? Is there anything that you would offer in that regard?
There is, and this is. I was actually called the other day both a doom porn peddler and a hopium salesman in the same day. So now, which was great because now I feel like I can just say whatever I actually feel, and I don't have to worry about appearing to be either one of these things. You can't have it both ways. So I think actually it's a balance of these two things. Like these bad things are really happening, and again, to sort of zoom out like to the big picture, with the Epstein stuff coming out. All of these dark things that were really only visible to the people that took the time to look into conspiracies and the alt news, the truth searchers, whatever you want to call them. It was only a group of people, sort of a self-selecting group of people that really wanted to know, that would get to that layer of truth. Now it's being broadcast, right? Now some of the darkest things that humanity can imagine are out there for everyone to see. And there's a bit of revelation of the method going on there. And so I think, again, stepping way back, what's going on here is that collectively humanity has suppressed these things which are disgusting and revolting, and we don't want to own that. We want to dissociate from it and push it out or repress it. And to sort of invoke Carl Jung, you can only do that so long. And when you do that at the individual level, everything Jung says, everything you don't make conscious eventually will come out at you from the outside world until you make it conscious and integrate it. And that is also true in the collective psyche of humanity. So all of these things, the totalitarianism, the trafficking of children, the imposed scarcity for agendas, all of these things are darkness, right? We don't like that. We think, I wouldn't do that, and hopefully other people won't do that either. And now that's been repressed long enough that it's come to the surface. It's come out in the outside world in such a way that we collectively have to see it. It's forcing us to see it, and we're going to be forced to integrate it. So the answer then to your question is that as much as, yes, we should, I clearly have always been a big advocate of prepping and building food systems and becoming more self-sufficient and building self-sufficient communities, becoming more resilient to these kinds of challenges. But now those things happen as a result of doing the inner work and looking at your own shadow and resolving your own, one of the things, I think it's incredibly brave, actually, Derrick, that you're very open about your struggles with addiction in the past. And so if people are able to look at those parts of themselves and integrate that and be honest about it with themselves, and then beyond that, at sort of the ancestral level, like what's in my transgenerationally, what's in my family that no one has wanted to look at, but now it's time. This is I've been calling it the omni crisis. I guess the World Economic Forum actually similarly calls it the poly crisis, but it's true. Like it's not just the economy, it's not just a food systems failure because of all the petrochemical damage that's been done for generations. It's not just the revelations in the Epstein. It's all of this all coming to the surface at the same time in a way that demands that we deal with it, that we integrate it. And so that's what we do. And we have to look at these things. And what is that? It raises the question, how do you integrate that kind of stuff? It's when it's a collective trauma, how do you integrate it at a personal level? And as best I can tell, and I'm one of us, right? I'm just working on this as well. It's like looking at these things and then noticing how am I reacting to this? Like what's going on within me? Why do I want to go buy canned goods and bury it so the government won't take it? Or how am I reacting to the Epstein stuff? Why am I angry at them for imposing scarcity, or ashamed that I can't grow 100% of the food for my family, or mad at the sheeple because they're refusing to look at reality, and that enables the technocrats to do that, right? There are things that come up in me that are negative or that are dark or something like this, and integrating that, as Jung said, doesn't mean that you forgive everyone and just get over it or like ignore that there are problems. This is not a soft, fuzzy Oprah Winfrey spiritualist secret kind of thing. This is, okay, what's going on in me when I think about these things? And then, I am mad at the sheeple, and it is pissing me off that we don't have a food growing locally. And So actually, instead of going and buying a bunch of tuna and burying that in the backyard so they can't find it, a more productive step to resolving these problems is to go start a garden and make it a community garden, involve people. I like to garden, so I'll do it because I enjoy it. I like to garden because I'm saving heirloom seeds that are in these just incredibly precious genetics that, as the seed companies have consolidated and then bought up the seed stock, and then they put out the Terminator seeds, there's less and less genetic diversity other than the stuff they shove under the ice at Svalbard, the seed bank there. But that makes me happy, right? That's a positive creative authorship of reality that I can do, rather than doing something from the fear perspective. Because when you do it from the fear perspective, you're still shoving it outwards, and that's going to necessarily feed all of these crises. So actually the answer is you don't have to have 20 acres and a mule or whatever a homestead. Clearly that would be nice, and the more of us that can be doing that, so that we can grow our own food and have other people that don't have the resources come help us with the labor that so much food production and homestead maintenance has. Those are the communities we need to be building, but it's got to be done from a creative authorship of reality place instead of a fear-based place. How does that land for you?
I love it, man. Thank you. That's so important. And I really want to just kind of stay there for a moment before we talk about some more headlines, because I know that, at least I'll just speak from my own experience, in the years that I've been doing this work, a decade and a half, and also trying to talk about the need for that internal work and how that plays a role in it, and what I consider, a holistic liberation movement. Yes, let's talk about food. Yes, let's talk about opting out of these systems and exposing corruption, but also we have to point the fingers back at ourselves. We need to look at ourselves in the mirror, all these kind of things, and really examine what role we're playing in these broader systems. And I've noticed, and maybe even some people hearing this might say, oh, okay, well, that sounds like you said, that sounds like Oprah Winfrey or something warm and fuzzy, but the technocrats, these psychopaths are coming to kill us, and what are we going to do? And yes, that is true. And the internal side of this struggle, I call it the struggle against our own internal tyrant, our doubts, fears, insecurities, limiting beliefs, and things that can hold us back. Like, that is so essential to I think creating a better humanity, because yes, we do need to store the food, and let's build the systems, and let's be proactive and activated about it. And let's also see what we can do for ourselves. I just really want to emphasize, everybody who's hearing that today, if that's new to you, please take some time to go back and re-listen to what Christian just said. Go through my work, because this has been a central theme over the years, that we, for the good of everyone, we have to focus on ourselves to some degree. We have to take time to do that. And I just also want to make a mention, I'll put this link in the show notes, your presentation you gave at the People's Reset just a couple months back, you talked about this in the context of permaculture and Zone Zero. And I thought that was a really beautiful presentation that kind of elaborates on what you just touched on there. So I want to really just recommend everybody to watch that, to listen to that, and to give it some thought. How much energy are you putting into your own personal cultivation in your own heart, as well as your family, your neighborhood, et cetera? And is that anywhere equal to the amount of time that you put in diving through the Epstein documents or listening to podcasts that are going to make you feel miserable about the world? I think we need to find a balance between that, right? Like, how much energy we dedicate to that, to being awake, informed, educated, and all that sort of stuff. But then what do we do with that information? Do we turn it into something positive? Do we use it to empower ourselves? Do we use it to empower other people? Because if not, then perhaps, they, them, those at the top are already winning by just making us be so black-pilled and convinced that all is hopeless, all is lost. So yeah, I really appreciate, the emphasis on that. Anything else you want to add to that before we jump back to some headlines?
No, I think, yes, I think that the technocrats think they're pushing the reset button, the great reset button on systems so that they'll get control. But I think the button they're actually pushing is such a big one that it's going to be. And I think, there's a certain beauty to consciousness and how sort of slippery it is. And I think the reset button, I think they're going to fail. I think ultimately the button that they're pushing is going to be a reset of human consciousness and a remembering that we're not trapped in this materialistic world, but it's a participatory reality that responds to our beliefs. And to some extent, to a very real extent, their attempt to take over had to be this extreme in order for us to collectively remember. So I think it is exactly as bad as it needs to get for things to get good. And I do think, it's, just to be clear, I don't think it's going to be better tomorrow, right? I'm not saying this is a rosy, I feel great about this situation. This is going to suck for a bit, but I do think they'll lose in the end, yeah.
Absolutely, I agree with you on that. Okay, well, let's go back to some of these headlines, some of the things you've been covering recently. Let me pull this one up here. You got this one that makes me real curious about what you covered. This is from March 11th, so maybe about 10 days ago. Biometric ID required for food for 800 million people. Digital IDs rolling out. Obviously, the headline kind of says it all there, but maybe you can give us some more detail on where you're seeing this in the world, where the convergence of biometrics and digital IDs. I mean, this has been happening in places like India and others where they've been testing these kind of programs with the help of Bill Gates and others. But tell us what this report's all about here.
Yeah, you nailed it. So that 800 million is the number of people in India that are on food assistance. And so as of earlier this month, it is now mandatory that when they go to collect those food rations, that they use some form of biometric ID, whether that's an iris scan or a face scan or a fingerprint scan. And there have definitely been instances already where, those scanners aren't working, and that causes problems and agitation, to say the least, at this place. What's even more alarming since then is that, we talked about Mexico and their desire to roll out eliminate cash for purchase of fuel in the toll booths. And then Sri Lanka this week has now made it mandatory for people to have a QR code so that they can purchase fuel. So the whole point here is that we know, as you said earlier, this audience is already fortunately familiar with a lot of these agendas. You've spoken with Catherine Austin Fitts and so forth. So we all know that the digital ID, they've been chomping at the bit to get this rolled out for some time. And they've already developed those technologies and the blockchain for tracking all of these assets and tokenizing everything and so forth. They've built this infrastructure already, and they only need that right crisis now to roll it out. And that is what we seem to be looking at. And so, yeah, Sri Lanka has implemented a QR-based rationing scheme. It's tied to an individual vehicle, because otherwise, they explain, you could just fill up at one station and then go down the road and do it at another place. This is kind of like they used the smartphones to track your purchases at grocery stores during COVID, but again, it's a level further. And just as Mexico, you mentioned, just as Mexico had said, we're going to do this now, we're going to do this 2026, this year, this is going to happen. So too, just in the last few weeks, did the UK announce that they're going to move forward with the Brit card. I think the quote from the media was, we have no idea how much it's going to cost, but it's really immaterial because it's not about that. We don't really care how much it's going to cost you. We're going to roll this out no matter what. And as well, the EU had passed something, I forget the exact letters on it, but it was saying that we will require all member nations to offer to the 400 plus million EU residents a digital ID wallet that will be used for government services and finance and real estate and so forth. And the date, and this year, so doing it, both of those things this year. And that was a few years ago, a few weeks ago, I think, when I did that report. And now it becomes more clear that, they have to roll this stuff out this year, because they're going to be rationing energy and very soon food and they'll need these IDs to tie it all together.
Yeah, and this is, I just want to share again, here's the headline, one of the headlines I saw that you mentioned, Keir Starmer faces Brit card headache as legal challenge deadline looms. So it seems like maybe there's going to be a little bit of pushback, but which, of course, I want to encourage everybody, push back however you can in whatever ways you can. Sometimes I'll get some pushback of my own. People say, you focus too much on exit and build and building parallel systems. What we need to be doing is resisting the tyrants, or we need to go overthrow them and pull out the guillotines and stuff like that. And, my response typically is, and sort of in a joking way, but also honestly, like, okay, well, let me see you lead that violent revolution you think is going to save the day, and we'll see what happens. But I do think people should push back where they can. For me, again, focusing on the parallel systems and opting out is part of that so-called resistance. And in Mexico, they are playing a similar card, because like I mentioned with the toll booths, they're claiming, as always, these people, they care so much about the children, as the Epstein files have shown us. So they're always just desperate to protect the children. So they want to push internet IDs to protect the children from, porn, or protect them from, pet predators online, which are all things that I think everybody here cares about. but we know that these people can't be trusted. In that same sense, Mexico does have a cartel, violent, sort of extra governmental cartels that do commit violence in parts of the country from time to time. And so that is a very useful tool for the government to use. And there's, it's a whole other topic of research in terms of CIA funding and going to cartels and guns making their way down there, which makes many of us very skeptical because it seems to be such a useful ploy that they can pull out every now and then, much like the U.S. government has done with ISIS or Al-Qaeda or terrorists over the years, right? But nevertheless, it is something that they use. And I've seen this in some of the Mexicans I know who are supportive or at least open to this idea because they say, well, the cartels are stealing, gas, petrol at the gas stations. And so they come there and they steal the gas and they steal the cash. Or occasionally there'll be some toll booths that might get robbed by criminals. And well, it's because they're holding cash on them. If we just remove the cash from the equation, then the criminals won't have anything to take. Obviously, we know that that's not going to be the end of, the criminals. If the legit criminals out there who are committing those crimes, they'll find another way. They'll just go to the gas pipelines and they'll steal it from there. And I think also the Mexican people, generally speaking, don't trust the Mexican government is looking out for their well-being. So when they say these kind of things, like with their push a sort of the first form of a biometric ID, they claim it's to help with missing people. There's a lot of missing people who've gone missing over the decades due to the same cartel violence. Well, if we're going to be able to find people, we need to have a biometric ID for them so that in the case of a missing person, we can easily locate them and see them through cameras that they're trying to get installed everywhere. And so it's always going to be this card that they play, that they just care so much about the people. They want to help us out. They want to prevent fraud. They want to protect the children. I think everybody here is not operating under those illusions. You can see that there's something bigger going on here. But it's not surprising to me to see different countries play that same card. Now, I wanted to look at another report you have here. You mentioned this to me briefly in passing, and I know you have this graphic we're going to pull up. This one is from March 20th, so just a couple of days ago. Energy Armageddon hits, food rationing, and as you mentioned, lockdowns begins. But there's something specific you mentioned here, this absolute zero blueprint. So could you talk to us about this, and then I'll go ahead and pull that up on screen.
Yeah, that's the graphic I sent. There's a group in the UK called the FIRES Group that released a report some years ago that was called Absolute Zero, which provides this. It's a timeline sort of counting down how to achieve a zero carbon future. And clearly there are many plans that are phasing out fossil fuels and delivering on that. But this one is it's beautiful because it gives you this really clear timeline. And if you go down a bit, literally the bottom line of the report is a rapid elimination of fossil fuels. Yeah, rapid reduction in the supply and use of all fossil fuels. And that first line that we're edging up towards right now is 2030. So as we go down the left column, those are the things that they intend to get done within the next.
Well, so it says completely phased out 2030 to 2049. I mean, they don't hide it. They don't hide it at all.
Yeah. But even on the left, so just leading up to 2030 is the stuff that it would seem that they're behind on their goals. But they would, if they're going to pull that off, then this is exactly the kind of crisis that they'll need to stage. And so at the top, you see that we're going to stop having any fuel-based cars. It'll be electric only. And this definitely aligns with, for example, Vietnam this week said, well, because of the fuel crisis, we're going to incentivize people to be purchasing electric cars. And then growing the rail system, all electric. Eliminating flying is that third line there. By 2030, they want to have most domestic flights shut down, and most of the airports that are used for those kinds of connecting flights shut down. Only the main hubs for international travel will still be open, and then eventually, as you go right there, all remaining airports are closed by 2050, which is crazy. And we see the rising vibes, so to speak, of that right now, especially in Australia, where they're already saying, hey, we're going to have to start cutting domestic flights because we got our jet fuel from China and China just cut us off. So what little fuel we do have will have to be reserved for international flights. So a lot of these look like they are happening now. And a lot of it's been in the conversation for a long time. Like the Biden administration and the EU were both talking about eliminating ownership, or California specifically, of course, even put it into the law that they'd be eliminating the production of diesel and fuel cars. But now they have the impetus to actually get those things done. The next line there was shipping, and it said, well, because there's no such thing as shipping without, there's currently no freight ships operating without emissions, so we got to get rid of shipping. But this is a crazy cult, right? This is a cult of global warming that has been operating and making these what do they call it, like extreme adaptation plans, deep adaptation, they've called it for some time. And one of the things that raised my eyebrows this week was the realization that, the UK has a group called the Net Zero, what is it? The Department of Energy Security and Net Zero, which is there within the UK government. That's the body that creates those kinds of global warming cultist policies and has pushed all of the climate alarmism to try and justify that. And as the fear stopped working, right? You can only say we only have 5 years left before the entire Earth bakes so many times since 1980 before people are like, I'm not buying it. I've heard this story before. I'm not buying it anymore. I saw Al Gore's movie way back when. This is nonsense. And so they've lost that power, whatever power that was purchasing for them, they've lost now. And so this was necessary. They had to pull off this energy cutoff and this energy crisis that we're looking at now. And what raised my eyebrows was the realization that in the UK's policy documents for how to handle a fuel crisis, it's called the National Emergency Plan for Fuel. It is both authored by that net zero group within the UK government, and then within the plan it says it'll be implemented by and executed by the net zero group. So the people that are dealing with this energy crisis right now are the very same global warming cultists that have been doing this for decades and have been just chomping at the bit for any reason to push these crazy totalitarian policies there.
Wow. Yeah. And, I wanted to just show this graphic one more time. So for those who are watching on the screen, on the third column there, where that's just like that red circle with the white line through it. So they're not hiding their plan. So even if you were to, take off your conspiracy hat for a moment and take these people at their word that they're doing all this because they need to phase out certain allegedly damaging, materials and technologies in order to get us to a net zero, or as they call it, absolute zero world where everything's running off electricity, or at least that's kind of what they're framing it here. Even if you take that charitable view, they're not denying that in the 2030s to 2040s, they're going to close all airports, or at least aim to. All shipping declines to zero. And then they've got this nice 2050, that's where that red circle with the line through it. And that's basically nothing, no shipping, no flying, nothing for a good period. And then I guess somewhere beyond 2050, we get to electric planes may fly, they added that may in there, with synthetic fuel once there are excess non-emitting electric supplies. Some naval ships operate with onboard nuclear power and new storage options. So again, even if you take the charitable view, they are clearly, groups like this are clearly showing the same thing with the fossil fuels down here and other just total phasing out of fossil fuels. They're making it clear that this is part of their plans. And so it's not a right-wing conspiracy, whatever, all the tropes that we've heard. These people, and I know you've quoted them, and I've seen quotes go by where a lot of these officials, they say it themselves, like there's going to be a period of pain. There's going to be a period of hurt. There's going to be we're going to have to push this on the public because they know the public is going to resist, even if you're just a normal person, not some conspiracy theorist, when you're hearing from the government or some official telling you, well, by this year, you're going to stop driving, or you're not going to be able to get access to all these different foods because we're going to phase out shipping because of climate change, there will be a rebellion against that. And they're not hiding it by any means at all. And I guess that brings me, as we start to wrap up here, to another question. Do you think that these types of folks also have their own plans in place for what happens when that resistance does take place, when the public, as seems to have been happening the last 5 years and beyond, as more and more the public catches wind and recognizes these people are going to try to limit my freedom to travel, my freedom to eat what I want, my freedom to have fuel, to do these kinds of things. Do you think there will be a backlash with the public? And do you think that the folks trying to push these narratives are already preparing for that?
Well, there's no doubt. Before we talk about that, I just want to go back to there's, in the spirit of Ice Age Farmer, there's a line there for food too. And that's what makes that, as you said, that's what makes that report so fantastic, is that big red line that indicates this is a hard stop, right? This is not we're going to imagine a better future, and we're going to develop the technologies needed so that humanity can see, a cleaner future with the transition to it. No, it's a big red dot that says everything stops. That it's just crazy. But that food line.
Yeah, they say total energy required to cook or transport food reduced to 60%. Beef and lamb phased out, along with all imports not transported by train. Fertilizer use greatly reduced.
Right, so eliminating fertilizer is happening right now, and then beef and lamb phasing out. I mean, that's why the billionaires who have been so furiously investing in fake meat and in indoor vertical farming and all these alternative ag tech things have been throwing investment at it, even though it's clearly economically unviable under the reality we were living in, is because this is their plan. They know that the future they are ushering us into through this energy crisis right now is one where it is the only economically viable way to produce food, because the farmers don't have diesel, so you can't work the fields. Just this week, Thailand grounded the entire fishing fleet because the fishermen can't afford the diesel. Ireland, the Irish Fishing Association warned earlier today that they'll be shutting down their entire fleet within 3 weeks if the government doesn't step in to provide assistance with the fuel. I mean, as luck would have it, Israel has been developing fake fish for years now. They've become the capital of fake 3D printed proteins and stuff like that. So yeah, now if it wasn't clear before that this was their plan, right? If you didn't buy it before, then it's very clear that these people who were the ones that resources and invested it in things that didn't make any economic sense back then are also the ones who have authored these plans and are now ushering us through these transitions. And of course, they have a plan for how to handle resistance. I think we saw a lot of what it will look like during COVID, right? Where it becomes it was a lot of social pressure was applied to people. So if you weren't doing your part to curb the spread, it was 2 weeks to flatten the curve. And if you didn't honor that, if you didn't submit to the demands of the medical tyranny, then you were the problem, and you were the one. It was because of you that I have to even lock down for another week now, right? So you became the source of the problem in the eyes of the people that we should try not to, the sheeple that we should try not to get too mad at, but we should be trying to inform, and we are right now. So yeah, I think we've seen that there was a bit of this in COVID too already, where they were trying to improve energy efficiency. But that will be it, right? It'll be if you see someone who's driving on the wrong day, or taking too much fuel, or double dipping from their fuel rations, or if they're taking too much food, once we get to that level, then you need to turn them in, because it's because of them that you don't get to eat eggs on Thursday. It was supposed to be egg day, but we don't have enough because some people were taking too many, right? It'll be that kind of a social pressure. And then it'll be criminal, right? They'll make it be fines and jail time or whatever else needs to be. You'll take a significant hit to your social credit score if you eat too many eggs. But yes, the short answer is I think they have absolutely planned extensively about how to corral the people into this future.
Unfortunately, I think you are correct, my friend. I think they have definitely planned for this, and that doesn't mean we shouldn't still strive to do what we can to keep freedom alive and to keep our individual independence and our community interdependence alive. We just got to be prepared. And as you said earlier, I mean, I tend to be in the mindset that it has to get worse before it gets better. I don't know why that seems to be humanity's destiny at the moment. And I wish it wasn't that way, but it appears like we're going to go through a period of hardship in order to awaken humanity. It seems like we tend to operate best, at least the masses of us, of humanity, when we are under threat, as we saw during COVID with that reaction to the feeling of lockdowns and threats in your face 24/7 news cycle. That motivated a lot of people to say, maybe I need to grow my own food now. Maybe I need to start connecting to local people in my area. Maybe I need to get some land or whatever, homeschool my kids, whatever moves they made largely in reaction to what was in their face and was unavoidable at that point because of the 24/7 news cycle. And my only hope is that as we face these new incoming challenges, whether through the war or whatever other thing they cook up, because I see Trump is talking about aliens now and releasing alien stuff. So who knows what narrative it will be. The point is, we know what the agenda is. We heard their announcement of the Great Reset. We've seen them talking about Agenda 2030. We've heard them talk about 2050. And obviously these plans, absolute zero, these are real plans. And so we need to be prepared for that in whatever ways we can, mentally, physically, and spiritually as well. And do your best to reach those around you. I think that's what really matters. So any other closing words, brother, before I let you go for today?
I do. I wanted to say to your audience that that there's a lot of people that talk about truth and alternative media and stuff like that. And Derrick is one of the real ones, right? So when I was injured by an antibiotic and had to lay low for a few years, there were a lot of people who were mad at me and then said that a number of things that just were not helpful. And Derrick was one of the very few people that was genuinely reaching out to me like, how are you? How's your family? Is there anything I can do to help? So like Derrick he's a real person. He's a real guy. He's coming at this from the heart. You know, the amount of effort that he puts into the People's Reset Conference, like you can't do that and be faking it. So I just wanted to acknowledge and share some gratitude for the fact that you really are coming at this with your whole heart, and I appreciate that. And so definitely support Derrick if you're able, and thank you for what you do, Derrick.
Brother, I appreciate that very much. And yeah, I'm glad you made it through all your physical and spiritual challenges. And I can tell you that so many people are grateful to have you back and here with us, spreading this information. So everybody, again, if you haven't found him, if you still haven't got the word, by chance you're seeing this interview and you're like, oh my God, Christian, he disappeared. No, he's been back for a little while. Check him out at Unshadowed on Substack and YouTube. I will put all the links in the show notes, of course. And please check out his links. Everything we discussed will be there. Guys, it's time for us to take care of ourselves, take care of each other, take care of your own heart, your own mind. Let's focus on that zone zero as the world gets a little crazier, and let's see how we can build that better world we know is possible. All right, friends, that's my interview with Christian Westbrook, formerly known as Ice Age Farmer, currently known as Unshadowed. If you enjoyed that interview will be released tomorrow all by itself, so stay tuned for that and share it with your friends and family with all the show notes and everything. And that's going to do it for today's show, guys. Thank you so much for supporting me. I hope you've enjoyed the show. Just want to mention a couple other things on the way out. If you're curious about hearing me speak in person, which, as I've said before, I think my in-person talks and solutions are some of the most important work I do have a few upcoming events. I will be speaking at the Texas Libertarian Party Convention next month, April 10th to 12th in Abilene, Texas. Although I don't vote, I'm not a member of the Libertarian Party or any party, I will be speaking to them about the failure of political action and why we should focus on agorism and exit and build. And if you're anywhere near Texas, you want to go check that out. It'll be me. It will be Scott Horton and some other cool people. So check that out. And if you're ever curious just to know where I'm going to be next, because I am planning a summer tour in the U.S. coming up in May, June, and July, you can go to theconsciousresistance.com/tour, and you can find all of my upcoming dates. The other thing I'll mention is my other half, 33, I'll be performing music next month. I'm going on a mini tour with Dub FX and with Presence. We're going to be performing in Seattle and Portland in April as well. And then we're going to Texas again for Confluence. Confluence is a festival organized by Alex Zeck, and I'll be performing music. Dub FX will be performing music. Presence will be performing music. So you can find that out at Confluence. And if you want to get tickets to our Seattle or Portland shows, you can go to dubfx.com. And in fact, our closing video for tonight is going to be a brand new video from Dub FX and Presence featuring a momentary shot of yours truly. It's called Come Again. It's a really great jam. I hope you guys will enjoy it. Follow me everywhere, Derrick Broze, theconsciousresistance.com. Sign up to support on Substack, buy me a coffee, or at theconsciousresistance.com/invest, guys. Keep doing your best out there. Keep raising the good vibes, focusing on solutions, and exposing the truth. Until next time, remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free. Peace.
All right. Let's go. Come on. Yo. And so push your like this up and let me hear you sing along. Bust up a rhythm. the more you know we coming strong. Now we're connecting in the right way. We are projecting love as we pray. No matter who you are, I'm telling you that you belong. This community could never ever do you wrong. We are one tribe and one family, pushing light all night and all day. Come again, come again. I will light it up, let the fire transcend. Come again, come again. Speaking my truth, I could never let it bend, yo. Come again, come again. I will disrupt Babylon to the end. Come again, come again. Revving up the youth once again. Hey! Picking up the pace as the bass roll through. Jump up higher if you want a better view. Tune up a frequency that we can all create. Cause this is our power, now we all collaborate. Pushing love and light is what we do. This is how we get through.
Cause in the one feel the racket at the Casablanca. From the Acapulco to Morelia, we spit palabras. Because we know that music is a dharma. We're spreading the right morality through melody and make us sharper. Making mistakes next time we try in order. I'm praying up to the Holy Mother and the Holy Father. And all the people are awakening up to the power. Consciousness is quickening, it's getting louder. And now we're living today, tomorrow not guaranteed. We gotta choose to be free until our souls are complete. It's how we want to succeed, we never need to compete. We're playing respectfully, a vibe of integrity. We take the days on and let the place roll. I'm cooking up a fire like a crowd call. And when the beat bouncing like a pogo stick, that they smoke so thick and they get that toast that gets a move on.
It up, let the fire transcend. Come again, come again. Speaking my truth, I could never let it bend. No, come again, come again. I will disrupt Babylon to the end. Come again, come again. Shake up the youth once again. Hey!
Since 2012, the Conscious Resistance Network has been an independent media organization focused on empowering individuals through education, philosophy, health, and community organizing. We work to create a world where corporate and state power do not rule over the lives of free human beings. Our motto is leading by example and helping others in their pursuit of freedom. Visit theconsciousresistance.com to find our articles, documentaries, interviews, podcasts, books, and more. Remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free.